Welcome to Hood Politics. In this episode, I will be discussing the story of Kashmier James. The facts of the case are as follows. For most, Christmas is a time for being with the loved ones and celebrating life, but sometimes a day that should be filled with joy can end with tragedy. On Christmas Day in 2010, a woman named Kashmier James was celebrating the holiday with their family. Kashmier, who was affectionately known as Cash by her loved ones, had previously lived in LA, but had since moved to the city of Riverside, roughly 60 miles east. But on that day, Kashmier and her 3-year-old daughter Nevaeh were spending the holiday with their family in LA. They spent the day laughing, eating, listening to music, and enjoying time with their loved ones. Later that night, Kashmier and Nevaeh said their goodbyes and got into their car to head back to Riverside. But before heading home, Kashmier decided to visit her longtime friend, DeAndre Woods. At around 10:20 p.m., she made her way to DeAndre's home, which was located on 85th Street near Western Avenue. DeAndre and about 6 other people were standing outside of the home as she arrived. Kashmier got out of her car and DeAndre greeted her. The two discussed their Christmases as well as New Year plans while Nevaeh sat in the back seat of the car just a few feet away. Moments later, a blue Chevy Tahoe with tinted windows made his way down the street. DeAndre was standing with his back towards the street while Kashmier was facing the street. The Tahoe slowed down as it drove past. About 30 seconds later, DeAndre went to hug Kashmier and gunfire erupted. Kashmier yelled, "Oh my God," and fell onto DeAndre, knocking him to the ground. While on the ground, DeAndre saw a man with a gun jogging towards him. He got up and ran and heard multiple gunshots. As he was running, he slipped on the wet ground and dislocated his shoulder. After making it to a safe place, he looked back and saw the shooter running towards Western Avenue. At the time of the shooting, a man named Derek Jefferson was walking nearby when he heard the shots. He saw a man pointing a gun at a woman. He then jumped into some bushes for cover. Derek saw a blue Tahoe with tinted windows and 24-inch chrome rims speed away from the scene and head southbound on Western Avenue. He noticed 2 black men sitting in the driver and passenger seats. Derek ran to the scene of the shooting and saw Kashmier lying on the ground. He approached her and saw that she had been shot in the head. She was still conscious but couldn't speak. She gestured towards her car and Derek noticed Nevaeh sitting in the back seat. Luckily, she was uninjured, but unfortunately, she did witness the shooting. Derek and another neighbor named Mary Walker took Nevaeh out the car and took her to Mary's house. When Derek returned to the scene, Kashmier was no longer conscious. Several neighbors called 911, and a few minutes later, police and paramedics arrived at the scene. They found that Kashmier had gunshot wounds to her head, neck, and legs. Paramedics attempted to help Kashmier, but sadly, there was nothing they could do. And at 10:41 p.m., Kashmier James was pronounced dead. She was 25 years old. Kashmier had grown up in LA and spent most of her life there. She graduated from University High School in 2003 and attended Mount St. Mary's University. She had recently graduated from medical school and was working as a nurse. She was eager to start saving money for her home, along with her boyfriend and Nevaeh's father, Christopher Jackson. Officers took Nevaeh to the police station where she was later picked up by Christopher. Detectives arrived at the scene and began their investigation. They recovered 13 shell cases from the street and found that they were all fired from the same gun. They also found that the gunshot wounds to Kashmier's legs occurred after she already had fallen to the ground. By the time detectives arrived, most of the people that were present during the shooting had fled the scene, and those that were willing to talk said they didn't see the suspects' faces, they just saw the blue Tahoe. Detectives then visited multiple nearby gas stations in hopes that one of their cameras captured the Tahoe. They were able to obtain surveillance video from one of the stations. It showed a blue Chevy Tahoe or blue GMC Yukon with chrome rims traveling southbound on Western Avenue just moments after the shooting. A Chevy Tahoe and GMC Yukon look very similar, and on a dark night and a stressful situation, it would be very easy to confuse the two. Outside of the vehicle descriptions and a dark surveillance video, investigators had little to go on. They theorized that the shooting could have been a case of mistaken identity or even a robbery gone wrong, but those theories were quickly ruled out and detectives surmised that the shooting was gang-related. 85th Street is located deep in 8-Tray gangster Crip territory, and investigators knew that 8-Tray was at war with the Rollin' 90s Crips and the Rollin' 100s Crips. Both gangs are located just south of 8-Tray territory along Western Avenue. Kashmier didn't have any gang ties, and DeAndre wasn't a documented gang member, but investigators believe that them hanging out in an active gang area, especially at that time of night, made them targets. The community was in shock. Even for an area that sees its fair share of violence, this incident in particular struck a nerve. Killing a woman in front of her daughter on Christmas night was a different level of evil. 3 days after the shooting, on December 28th, Kashmier's family and friends held a press conference at the scene of the shooting. They asked for the public's help with identifying the suspects and bringing them to justice. Christopher stood in front of the mic and stated, "I'm begging for help to catch this person that did this to my daughter, did this to her mother on Christmas Day." He continued, "We woke up a happy family, opened our gifts, she opened her gifts, looked at her mama, thinking nothing like this will happen. Whoever out there can give a tip, a lead, a word, or something to catch this person, these two people, whoever they may be, who did this heinous act to my baby mama and to this child. And I'm reaching out to every neighborhood, every friend I know. If you know something, please tell something, say something, because you're not doing it for me, you're doing it for her. This 3-year-old will never wake up to see her mother again in life. How can I explain it to her day in and day out? I can't. I cry so much, I don't think I got any more left in me. I cry for this girl every day. I gotta wake her up now. I've been doing it, but now I do it all by myself. I just want the person to get caught who did this act to my baby mama and this girl's mother. Her mother was her life, and this is what it ends up to be on Christmas Day, on the day of giving. Won't y'all give back to us, to my family?" Christopher held Nevaeh as she leaned into the mic and said, "Please help my mommy." Kashmier's friend Deanna said, "I still don't believe it. Whoever did this, you need to come forward. It's just wrong. It's just senseless. Now her daughter has to grow up without a parent." LAPD Commander Robert Green said the case had outraged the community. He stated, "Even among criminals, there is a code of conduct, and it's necessary that the cowards that did this shooting are taken off the street so they won't shoot again." Sister Leader Heron of the Ceasefire Committee stated, "The community has responded in a very positive way. Help this family as if it was your own, because if you don't, then tomorrow it could be your own." The attendees then held a candlelight vigil and shared memories of Kashmir and prayed for her and her family. A memorial was placed at the scene, and mourners from all over the community stopped by to pay their respects. A $75,000 reward was offered for information leading to the killer's arrest, and the tips began pouring in, but none of them panned out. Kashmir's funeral was held on Wednesday, January 12, 2011, at West Angeles Church of God in Christ. Hundreds of people attended the service and looked on as Kashmir's family and friends took to the stage and shared memories of her. The pastor took to the stage and led the attendees in prayer. He asked God to bless Kashmir and cover her loved ones in strength and healing. Singers and praise dancers also took to the stage to celebrate the life of Kashmir. In January of 2011, police found an SUV matching Derek's description parked in front of a home near the intersection of 110th Street and Hobart Boulevard in Roland Hundreds Crip territory. It was a blue GMC Yukon. Officers took note of the Yukon but didn't take any further action. As the weeks turned to months, the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. Many feared that Kashmir's murder would go unsolved and she would just be another name on the long list of Los Angeles cold cases. But Kashmir's loved ones were determined not to let that happen. They held numerous press conferences, interviews, and candlelight vigils in order to keep Kashmir's name at the forefront. In the summer of 2011, investigators received an influx of tips regarding the murder. They were told that the 111 neighborhood Crips were responsible. 111 is a gang within the Roland Hundreds, and they have been feuding with the A-Tray gangsters for over 40 years. Investigators then received the names of the suspects. 34-year-old Darnell Houston, also known as Lil Pan, 24-year-old Lamar McKnight, also known as Barr, 16-year-old Ezekiel Simon, also known as Eloke, 17-year-old Markel Parker, also known as Mr., and 15-year-old Derek Williams, also known as Baby Beefy. Investigators found that Lamar lived at the home located near 110th and Hobart and was known to drive the Yukon. Detectives then found that the Yukon had been repossessed in June, and at the time of the repossession, it no longer had 24-inch rims, but a decal with the number 24 was still on the vehicle, so investigators believed that the rims were taken off prior to the repossession. In August of 2011, the suspects were arrested and taken in for questioning. LAPD homicide detectives Roger Guzman and Stacy Shimkowiak conducted the interviews. Derek was arrested for being an accessory after the fact. Detectives suspected that he had helped get rid of the SUV's rims. During the interview, Derek admitted to being with the other suspects at the gang's hangout on Christmas night, but he denied knowing anything about the shooting. When detectives were informed that the rims weren't found during a simultaneous search of his family's home, they allowed Derek to go free. During the search, investigators found a notebook entitled Young Hoodsta in a drawer. They also discovered 111 gang graffiti on the underside of the top bunk in Derek's bedroom. There was also a drawing of a woman with an X over her body. Investigators believed that it was a reference to the murder. There were also 3 lines next to the drawing, and investigators believed that those marks represented murders Derek had participated in. Detectives also searched Lamar's family home for evidence. They found a set of 24-inch rims in the garage. They matched the description that Derek had given them on the night of the shooting, and they were identical to the ones seen in the surveillance video. On Wednesday, August 31st, 2011, investigators announced that Darnell Houston, Lamar McKnight, and Ezekiel Simon were each being charged with murder for the death of Kashmier James and attempted murder for the shooting of DeAndre Woods, as well as gun and gang enhancement charges. Although Ezekiel was a juvenile, he was charged as an adult. A few weeks later, investigators arranged for Darnell and Lamar to each be placed in a jail cell with the man known as Witness X. Witness X was what investigators called a confidential, reliable witness. They would place him in monitored cells with suspects in hopes that he would get them to talk about their crimes. Witness X had performed 200 similar operations and had received close to $70,000 in compensation for his services over the years. He belonged to a neighborhood Crip gang and knew Darnell because they had been in prison together in the 1990s. During their conversation, Darnell admitted to being involved in the murder and said he was the shooter. He also said that Lamar, Ezekiel, Markel, and Derek were in the Yukon at the time of the murder. Darnell said the younger 111 members weren't doing enough for the gang and he was training them. On the same night as the murder, he had taken them on a mission to another rival gang's territory. Shortly afterwards, the group spotted 7 rivals hanging outside of a church. One of the young 111 members pulled out a 9mm handgun and fired 17 shots at the group, but didn't hit anyone. They then returned to their hangout and rearmed. Lamar then drove to 85th Street, where Darnell got out of the Yukon and opened fire. Darnell demonstrated to Witness X how DeAndre moved Kashmier around and used her body as a human shield as she was repeatedly shot. He said he didn't feel bad for what happened to Kashmier because she was a tramp associate. Tramp is a derogatory term for a tray. Darnell said that the group went on missions all night long. When they came back from one, they went on another. Darnell said he dismantled the gun and threw it into the ocean. He didn't believe the police had anything on him other than hearsay. He went on to say that he was politicking before the shooting and thought that someone who overheard the argument was snitching on him. He was worried that Derek might have been the one talking and he might have to kill him. When Lamar talked to Witness X, he mumbled and spoke in pig Latin because he was leery of the camera and intercom inside of the cell. Lamar said that he got rid of the gun and he believed the police couldn't tie him to 111 because he didn't have any gang tattoos. He went on to say that he also believed that one of the young gang members was snitching on him. Initially, it was believed that Derek was only an accessory after the fact, and after the rims were found elsewhere, he was essentially in the clear. But after Darnell told Witness X that Derek was in the Yukon at the time of the murder, investigators rearrested him and took him in for questioning. Detectives Guzman and Shimkowiak told Derek that he had been identified as being in the SUV. They repeatedly told him to tell the truth, and Derek repeatedly denied being involved. Shimkowiak told him that he won't be going home like last time. She stated, "What happens on Monday is the district attorney decides whether or not they're going to file charges on you, or whether they're going to determine something else to do with you." Derek then asked her what charges will be filed, and Shimkowiak replied, "We'll find out Monday, and it's going to be a culmination of our paperwork up to this day, and whatever I write after tonight, and I'm telling you, if I write tonight that your statement is a bunch of lies, and it doesn't match with what we already heard from other witnesses and co-conspirators and people involved, I could tell you right now, the district attorney is going to be like, screw this guy, he's a liar." After thinking it over for a few moments, Derek agreed to tell the truth. Derek admitted to being present when Darnell complained that Lamar and the others weren't putting in enough work for the gang. He stated, and they was over there mad and drunk, talking about we're not putting in no work. And they was arguing over us, like we don't put in no work, we don't do nothing. Lamar then told Derek, Ezekiel, and Markel to get into the backseat of the SUV. Derek said he didn't hesitate because Lamar had a gun. Shemkowiak asked Derek what he thought putting in work for his gang entailed, and he replied, killing people. He claimed that he didn't want to go along on the night of the shooting. Derek said that Lamar had once tried to get him to rob a woman, but he refused. He admitted that on the night of the shooting, he sat in the back seat between Ezekiel and Markel. Lamar was the driver and Darnell was the shooter. Derek told the detectives that when Darnell started shooting, he couldn't do anything about it. He stated, I couldn't just hop out and run right there because I'm nowhere by my house. And this is the first time ever in my life ever being in any situation, anything like that. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I was just 15 at the time and I couldn't do anything. Derek was then charged with murder for the death of Kashmier James and attempted murder for the shooting of DeAndre Woods, as well as gun and gang enhancement charges. Darnell, Lamar, and Derek pled not guilty. Ezekiel pled no contest to voluntary manslaughter and attempted murder. He received 29 years in prison. Prior to the trial beginning, Kashmier's mother, Kim, and Nevaeh spoke to the press about Kashmier and how they've been coping since her murder.
Now at 6, an Eyewitness News exclusive. An innocent mother gunned down on Christmas Eve in front of her 3-year-old daughter.
Can you help my mommy, please?
Now the trial of the accused killers begins tomorrow. And only on Eyewitness News tonight, you'll hear from the now 8-year-old little girl who witnessed her mother's murder. Hello, I'm David Ono.
And I'm Ellen Leyva. That shocking murder that made headlines 5 years ago is coming to trial tomorrow. Tonight, Eyewitness News has exclusive looks through the eyes of the youngest victim. As Miriam Hernandez reports, one small voice is speaking volumes about both loss and hope.
Once upon a time, there was 2 cool kids named George and Harold.
Nevaeh Jackson tells us God gave her gifts. One, she is a fast learner. That is a blessing to her grandmother, Kim, because there is so much they've had to learn since Nevaeh's mom was murdered.
The only thing I can pray to God is to continue to give me the strength to be able to deal with it.
Kashmier James was an innocent victim in a shooting Christmas Eve 5 years ago. Nevaeh was 3, and she spoke out.
Can you help my mommy, please?
Seldom do we interview a child who is a victim of crime, but Nevaeh and her grandmother say they want people to know their story, how through the tragedy they are determined to triumph.
Me, about 3 months, and me and my mommy.
Mommy, who even kept Nevaeh's sonograms.
Me and my mommy told me that, and my mommy.
Kashmier James became a nurse because she wanted to help people. In that spirit, her family launched the Kashmier James Foundation to save troubled youth. It's working to partner with South LA schools.
Instead of suspending the kids or expelling them out of school, they'll give them to us for 6 months.
They will learn to value their own lives and others. Hear how a child talks to a missing mom.
I say to her that for Christmas, I'll make you a present. For Thanksgiving, I'll say, I'll make you a present. For your birthday, I'll make you a present. And for Halloween, I'll make you a present.
And then her words to us last year was, I don't want you guys to ever hide anything about my mommy. I want to know.
Nevaeh witnessed her mother's death. In a rare move, prosecutors say the 8-year-old will testify. But here, we do not talk about that night. Kim and Nevaeh say it's about moving on. She says she'll give from her gifts.
I'll sing at church. I'll dance at charities.
A fast learner is ready to teach.
Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway.
There were 2 separate juries during the trial, one for Darnell and Lamar and the other for Derek. This is known as a dual jury, and it allows each jury to only hear evidence and testimony relevant to the case assigned to them. The trial began on Tuesday, July 21st, 2015. The prosecutor in the case was a woman named Antonella Nistorescu. Nistorescu painted Darnell and Lamar as cold-blooded killers with little regard for human life. She said that anyone willing to drive around and kill a random person just because they felt like it is a danger to society and should never see freedom again. The defense attorney for Darnell and Lamar was a man named Louis Sepe. Sepe said that there was no real evidence that they were responsible for the shooting. He went on to say that the prosecution's entire case was based on hearsay. Sepe said that there was no weapon linking them to the shooting, and none of the witnesses at the scene were able to identify the shooter or anyone else in the SUV. Mr. SQ called numerous witnesses to the stand. Derek testified about witnessing the shooting and seeing the SUV flee the scene. His description of the SUV, down to its color, tinted windows, and 24-inch chrome rims, matched the Yukon that was linked back to Lamar. A man named Tony Johnson also took the stand. Tony was a member of 111 at the time of the shooting. He had spoken with investigators several times about the shooting in exchange for leniency after his arrest for various crimes. Tony testified that on the night of the shooting, at around 9 p.m., he was at Ezekiel's home, located near 111th Street and St. Andrew's Place, which was a known 111 hangout. Tony said he was talking to Darnell when Lamar pulled up in the Yukon. Darnell and Lamar started smoking and then argued about who's going to pay for it. The argument turned heated, and Darnell told Lamar that he wasn't putting in any work for the gang. Lamar responded, "We can go to the Tramps right now." Tony said he understood that Lamar was suggesting they go to rival gang territory and commit a shooting. Tony then saw Ezekiel get out of the front passenger seat of the Yukon and get into the back seat. Darnell got into the front passenger seat and Lamar drove off. 3 days later, Tony was with Lamar at Ezekiel's house. Lamar told Tony that they had driven past a man and a woman standing by a car. They then turned around and pulled up next to them. Darnell jumped out and started shooting with a 9mm handgun. Lamar was worried that the Yukon had been caught on surveillance video. Tony then told police where to find the SUV in hopes of bettering his own legal situation, and that's when police located the Yukon on 110th and Hobart. DeAndre refused to testify at the trial, but the statements he made to investigators, including the description of the SUV, were presented to the jury. Mr. SQ also played an audio recording of Darnell's conversation with witness X. She then read a transcript of the recording to the court. She pointed out how Darnell admitted to being the shooter. Sepe told the court that none of the witnesses were credible. He spoke about witness X and said that he was an unreliable witness because he was being paid for his information. Sepe also spoke about witness X's recordings and told the court that prior to the trial, investigators had witness X review a prepared transcript of his conversation with Darnell. Witness X found that 85 to 90% of the transcript was inaccurate. He then listened to the recording with headphones and made extensive revisions to the transcript. Afterwards, he met up with prosecutors and investigators, and they all made further changes to the transcript. Sepe told the court that Tony was a criminal, and he had been arrested on drug charges while on probation when he began giving investigators information about the murder. Sepe said Tony wasn't a reliable witness because he stood to gain favor by testifying. Also, he had previously admitted to feeding investigators lies about the murder. For Derek's jury, Mr. SQ played both of his interviews with Detectives Guzman and Shimkowiak. The jurors also received written transcripts of both interviews. Mr. SQ emphasized how Derek initially lied about being involved, but ultimately admitted to being in the Yukon during the murder. The prosecution's gang expert was an LA County sheriff named Eric McDonough. He had been a deputy for 20 years and worked with the gang unit for 8 years. He told the court that he has handled hundreds of gang-related crimes and spoken to hundreds of gang members, interventionists, and community leaders regarding the gang lifestyle. McDonough concentrated on 3 gangs, with 111 being one of them. He acknowledged that 8 Trey is a rival gang. McDonough testified that Darnell, Lamar, Derek, and Ezekiel were all members of 111. This was based on field identification cards, tattoos, and other indicia. He explained that it wasn't unusual for gang members like Lamar to avoid getting gang tattoos in order to avoid detection by law enforcement. McDonough told the court that 111's activities include graffiti, drug sales, shootings, and murders. When asked if he had seen the gang participate in said activities during his time in the gang unit, McDonough said yes. He stated, "These are the activities that they do. These are their primary things that they're doing. I don't want to say on a daily basis, but on a weekly basis, monthly basis, this is what the gang does." McDonough also spoke about Derek during his testimony. When it came to the graffiti on the underside of the bunk, McDonough stated that the 3 lines were not meant to represent 111 because that's not how the gang depicts his name in writing. He agreed with the investigators' theory that the 3 marks represented killings. He also agreed that the drawing of the woman with an X over her body was not just a drawing. McDonough also spoke about Derek saying that he felt forced to get into the Yukon on the night of the shooting. He said that everyone there that night played a role, and although the younger members were acting on orders from the older member, they knew exactly what they were going to do when they got into the Yukon that night. He said Derek's role would have been to act as a backup if the gang had to defend itself against rivals, as well as be a lookout for police and rivals, and to validate the actual crime being committed. McDonough also pointed out how Derek said that Lamar wanted him to rob someone, but he refused. McDonough said that showed that Derek was able to decline participating in other crimes, but this time he chose to go along. The gang had committed multiple shootings that night, and at any time, Derek could have said no. During the closing arguments, the defense reiterated that there wasn't a weapon or a reliable witness in the case, and the prosecution's only evidence during the trial was hearsay. Nestorescu closed by saying that Darnell, Lamar, and Derek are cold-blooded killers, and that society would be a much safer place with them off the streets. On Friday, August 7th, 2015, Darnell and Lamar were found guilty of murder for the death of Kashmier James and the attempted murder of DeAndre Woods, as well as gun and gang enhancement charges. Just a few days later, on Monday, August 10th, Derek was found guilty of murder for the death of Kashmier James and the attempted murder of DeAndre Woods, as well as gun and gang enhancement charges. The sentencing for all three men was held on Friday, October 2nd, 2015. The courtroom was filled with Kashmier's family and friends, and during the sentencing, Nevaeh and Kim spoke to Darnell, Lamar, and Derek directly and told them how their actions impacted their lives.
Eyewitness News reporter Mark Cota-Robles is live at the courthouse in downtown LA, where the victim's daughter spoke before the judge. Mark.
Leslie, Kashmier James was 25 years old when she was shot and killed by those gang members on Christmas night 2010. Her 3-year-old daughter was there that night to witness what happened. This morning, a very emotional sentencing hearing inside a downtown Los Angeles courtroom. Here is some of the video. The victim's family had a chance to speak, including Kashmier's daughter, 8-year-old Nevaeh James.
Why have you not said you're sorry for taking my mommy away from me? My mommy was the love of my life. I remember that night and it scares you. You are supposed to love people, not hurt and kill them.
You sat here every day that you came in here and you smiled. Now, nobody showed no remorse for what you did. Even if you did feel guilty about it, you showed no remorse.
And Kashmier's uncle also spoke. He talked about his hatred for the defendants, but said he's choosing to forgive them, but said he would never forget what they did to his niece. The defendants themselves had the chance to speak, but had nothing to say before the court.
Shortly afterwards, the judge in the case, Kathleen Kennedy, handed down their sentences. Darnell Houston and Lamar McKnight were each sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Derek Williams was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. Judge Kennedy called the murder a really horrific crime. She stated, "Christmas is supposed to be one of the happiest days, especially for a child. Instead, this was probably the saddest day of this child's life. What a horrible thing to do to a child on Christmas." She continued, "It's so senseless and so tragic. An innocent woman has a right to be on the streets of Los Angeles on Christmas night." Kashmier's family and friends were split when it came to the sentencing. Although some were satisfied, others, such as Kim, wanted everyone involved to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. She felt that Ezekiel and Derek should have also received life sentences because they got into the Yukon knowing what they were going to do, and that fact alone makes them as guilty as the shooter. A year after the trial, in November of 2016, California voters approved Proposition 57. The proposition's focus was to end the revolving door of crime by emphasizing rehabilitation. The proposition allowed for juveniles that were tried in adult court to be retried and resentenced in juvenile court. On Thursday, May 17, 2018, a state appeals court reversed Derek's first-degree murder conviction and sent his case to juvenile court, where he was resentenced to 2 years. Derek spent the majority of his time going through rehabilitation programs and ultimately landed at Pine Grove Youth Camp in Northern California. The camp houses youth offenders between the ages of 18 and 25, and its mission is to prepare them for re-entry into society through education, mentorship, and therapy. The camp works in conjunction with CAL FIRE to train youth offenders in wildland firefighting operations and to put them on the path of employment after their release. When asked about Proposition 57 and why he wants to be a firefighter, Derek stated, "I'm thankful to Proposition 57 and what it did for me. I will use this opportunity to pursue a career in wildland firefighting. As a kid, always looked up to and respected firefighters. They represented teamwork and togetherness. I'm thankful for the blessing this chance has given me for a future. For someone who got off to a rocky start as a teenager, as an adult, my goals are to give back to society in a positive way and continue to help others." In January of 2020, Derek became the first Proposition 57 graduate from Pine Grove. He was released from custody in fall of 2020 at the age of 25 and now works as a firefighter. He also travels to juvenile detention centers and speaks to the youth about changing their lives. Kashmier's memory lives on through her family and friends. She's remembered as a smart and caring woman with a great sense of humor and radiant energy. Nevaeh is currently on her way to college, and she has received multiple scholarship offers from numerous universities. She has a strong foundation of loved ones helping her to push through. Detective Shemkowiak and District Attorney Nistorescu have stayed present in Nevaeh's life over the years and have become her mentors. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Please like, comment, and subscribe.